Marcus Ellis stood on his porch, weathered hands clutching the final eviction notice as he looked out over the modest home his family had lived in for 3 generations. At 42, the thought of starting over seemed impossible. 6 years of struggling. As a single father gone with the stroke of a relative's pen. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Maple Street, as if the neighborhood itself was stretching out its final hours. The small 3-bedroom house wasn't much by wealthy standards, but it had been everything to Marcus and his 2 children since his wife's passing. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dad, come inside. Your coffee's getting cold, called Emma, his 16-year-old daughter. She knew better than to mention the letter he'd been staring at for the past hour. They'd been through enough discussions about it over the last 6 months to fill a lifetime. He sighed, folded the paper carefully, and slipped it into his shirt pocket. "Coming," he replied, voice thick with emotion he wouldn't let surface. Not yet. The Ellis family home wasn't just any property. While the modest structure had sheltered the family through decades of joy and hardship, what made Marcus's situation truly heartbreaking was the history hidden from casual observers. Following his wife Rebecca's sudden death from an undetected heart condition, Marcus had struggled to maintain his job as a high school history teacher while caring for Emma and 8-year-old Liam. The medical bills had nearly bankrupted them, forcing Marcus to take out a second mortgage on the house his grandfather had purchased in 1952. As Marcus settled into his usual chair at the kitchen table, he glanced at the photographs lining the wall. 3 generations of Ellis family members stood proudly beside one another. His grandfather Thomas, who had worked at the local bank for 40 years, his father James, who had expanded the house while working as a carpenter, and Marcus himself. With Rebecca on their wedding day. "They're offering more than fair market value," Emma said softly, sliding a fresh cup of coffee in front of him. "We could get an apartment closer to your school. Maybe even in that complex near the park that Liam likes." Marcus nodded absently. They'd had this conversation so many times the words almost played themselves. "It's not about the money, Emma, you know that." She sat across from him, reaching for his calloused hand. "I know, but maybe it's time. Grandpa passed the house to Dad, and Dad passed it to you. You've carried it faithfully. No one would blame you for what? For giving up? For selling out to relatives who never cared about us until they wanted our property." Marcus withdrew his hand immediately, regretting his tone. "I'm sorry. It's just that nobody passing I would know what this house means to us. The memories we've made here, the life your mother and I built." Emma nodded patiently. "I understand, Dad. I've been here right alongside you. All those nights you stayed up grading papers after putting Liam to bed. All those weekends we spent fixing the roof or painting the fence. All those holidays when it was just the 3 of us figuring out how to move forward." The kitchen fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Another Ellis family heirloom that had witnessed decades of family life. Principal Rodriguez from Marcus's school had visited just last week, her usual confident demeanor replaced with genuine concern. She'd tried to help Marcus find affordable housing alternatives in the district. "We've exhausted every option," Rodriguez had explained. "The housing market is impossible right now, and with your salary." She'd left the sentence unfinished, but the reality hung between them. A single teacher's income wasn't enough to find comparable housing in the area, not with prices skyrocketing due to development. Now, as evening settled over the house, Marcus reached for the folder Rodriguez had left behind. Inside were apartment listings, budget worksheets, and information about emergency housing assistance, none of which solved the fundamental problem. Most families could point to their homes as shelter, as investment. Marcus could point to this house as the only stable thing his children had left after losing their mother. But tomorrow the moving trucks would arrive. His cousin Richard and Richard's wife Teresa had plans for the property, and Marcus's home stood directly in their path. Richard's father, Marcus's uncle, had discovered a legal loophole in the inheritance paperwork. Apparently, Marcus's father had never properly transferred the deed before his sudden death 3 years ago. The property technically belonged to the extended family trust, which Richard now controlled as executor. Richard had personally visited last month, his expensive shoes looking absurdly out of place on the worn carpet of Marcus's living room. "Marcus, I respect your family's history here," Richard had said with practiced sympathy. "But you have to understand, progress doesn't wait for settlement. What we're building will create enormous value for the family business." Marcus had simply pointed to the children's height marks penciled on the kitchen doorframe. "And what about what we've built here? Isn't that valuable too?" Richard had smiled thinly. "Family sentiments don't pay dividends. What we're offering is financially generous and considerably more than you'd get on the open market, given the condition of the place." The conversation had ended there. No amount of explaining could make someone like Richard understand what couldn't be measured in quarterly profits or property values. Marcus finished his coffee and stood up, moving to the window that overlooked the small backyard. In the gathering twilight, the old oak tree stood sentinel over the children's weathered swing set. "I should check the shed," Marcus said. "Make sure everything's packed up properly." Emma didn't try to stop him. After 6 years of being the man of the house, she knew when her father needed space with his thoughts. As he walked through the yard, checking that everything was properly secured for the moving truck, Marcus's mind turned to his father's words from years ago. "This house isn't just walls and a roof, son. It's where we've put down roots. Remember that." He had remembered. For years after Rebecca's death, he had maintained this home, kept it as a stable sanctuary for his grieving children, followed the budget plans that would eventually get them out of debt. He'd turned down opportunities to move for better-paying positions, knowing his children needed continuity more than extra income. But now, unless something changed in the next 24 hours, the only home his children had known since their mother's death would be lost forever. The papers were signed, the legal battles were lost. Richard and Teresa had won. Marcus took one last look at the yard bathed in moonlight and turned toward the house, not knowing that 300 miles away in the basement of the Central Metropolitan Bank, a maintenance worker was about to make a discovery that would change everything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The first time Marcus Ellis understood the true significance of his family's connection to the old Central Metropolitan Bank building, he was just 12 years old. The summer of 1994 found him walking alongside his father James through the grand marble lobby, past the ornate brass teller windows, toward the manager's office where his grandfather Thomas worked as head of security. "Pay attention, son," James had instructed that morning, lowering his voice as they passed the uniformed guards. "What Grandpa does here matters more than you know." By noon, they had been escorted to the basement level where the massive vault doors stood. Marcus watched in fascination as his grandfather input a complex sequence of numbers into an ancient-looking control panel. "This is my grandson, Marcus," Thomas had said, introducing him to Mr. Abernathy, the bank president. "He's ready to learn about our family's special arrangement." The bank president had studied Marcus intently before extending his hand. "Your grandfather has been protecting the secrets of this vault for 3 decades, he'd explained. "What looks like an ordinary job to most people is actually one of the most important positions in the city's financial infrastructure." That day had changed everything for Marcus. While his school friends dreamed of becoming astronauts or professional athletes, he began to see his grandfather's work differently, not as a boring security job, but as something mysterious and important. Now 30 years later, Marcus sat at the same kitchen table where his grandfather had once explained the family's unusual connection to the bank, a connection that had provided stable employment for 2 generations but had seemingly ended when the bank was acquired by a national chain and Thomas was forced into early retirement. "What are you thinking about?" Emma asked, setting down a plate of lasagna in front of him, comfort food for what might be their last night in the house. "Grandpa Thomas," Marcus replied. "Remember his stories about the bank vault?" Emma smiled softly, the ones about the secret compartments and how only 3 people in the world knew all the access codes. "I always thought he was just making up stories to entertain us." "He wasn't the type for tall tales," Marcus said, absent-mindedly tracing a deep scratch in the wooden table, a memory from when Liam had dropped his toy truck during dinner years ago. Marcus's grandfather Thomas had started working at Central Metropolitan Bank in 1965 as a young security guard. His military background and unimpeachable integrity had quickly caught the attention of the bank's owners, and within 10 years he had risen to head of security with unprecedented access to the bank's most sensitive areas. What few people knew was that Thomas had been entrusted with monitoring a special section of the vault, one that held safety deposit boxes dating back to the bank's founding in 1892. "Your grandfather saved the bank once," Marcus's father had told him when he was a teenager. "There was an attempted robbery in 1979. 3 armed men with inside information about the vault timing. Thomas spotted something off about their paperwork and triggered a silent alarm before they could reach the main vault. The bank's directors never forgot that. The special access and trust Thomas had earned led to a family legacy. When Thomas retired, he recommended his son James for a maintenance position at the bank, not security, but something that still kept the Ellis family connected to the institution that had provided for them for so long. James had worked there until the bank changed ownership and eliminated his position during modernization. "Do you think there was any truth to Grandpa's stories about the forgotten deposit boxes?" Emma asked, breaking into Marcus's thoughts. "Your great-grandfather certainly believed it," Marcus replied. He was convinced that somewhere in that old vault were safety deposit boxes that had been abandoned during the Great Depression, accounts whose owners had died without heirs or had fled the country without claiming their contents. The kitchen door swung open as Liam entered, his backpack still slung over his shoulder despite the late hour. At 14, he had his grandfather's build and his mother's kind eyes. Unlike Marcus's quiet determination, Liam burned with a more visible anger about their situation. "Just walked by the corner store," he said, hanging his jacket on the hook by the door. "Richard and Teresa are already measuring the lot, talking about how quickly they can tear everything down once we're gone." He paused, the unspoken truth hanging between them, which they soon would be. "Liam," Emma cautioned, glancing at their father. "It's all right," Marcus said. "No point pretending this time tomorrow they will own this place." Liam grabbed a soda from the refrigerator and sat heavily in his usual chair. "Ms. Rodriguez called me today. Said they're transferring all my paperwork to Westside Middle School." He took a long sip. "That's like an hour bus ride away." Marcus felt a pang of loss sharper than he'd expected. The school transfers made it real in a way that legal papers hadn't. "What did you tell her?" "Told her we're Ellis's, we'll manage." Liam took another sip of his soda. "Though I'm starting to think we should have fought harder. Maybe if we'd gone public with what Richard and Teresa are doing, taking advantage of a legal technicality to steal a house from their own family." "You know we couldn't," Marcus interrupted. "The publicity would have been terrible. For everyone. The last thing you kids need is to have your faces plastered all over the local news as the family being evicted." "Yeah, and that's exactly what Richard and Teresa are counting on," Liam countered. "Our silence, our dignity. Dad, we kept things together after Mom died. Where's the loyalty in return?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Marcus understood his son's frustration. Richard and Teresa had waited until Marcus was at his most vulnerable financially, then pounced on the legal loophole they'd discovered. Their efforts had been calculated and cold, justified by business logic that put property value above family bonds. "Some fights you can't win," Marcus said finally. "Your grandfather taught me that. Life changes, but family endures. Maybe it's just time for our chapter in this house to end." Liam shook his head but said nothing more. The three of them sat in silence as twilight deepened outside the kitchen windows. Tomorrow would bring the moving trucks, the final paperwork, the beginning of the end for the Ellis family home. None of them noticed Marcus's old phone tucked in the back of the junk drawer, beginning to vibrate with an incoming call-in number that hadn't contacted him in over a decade, connected to the bank where his grandfather and father had once worked, where someone had just made a discovery that would change everything. Dawn broke over the Ellis home as it had for decades, painting the walls in soft golden light. This dawn was different. This was the last morning the Ellis family would wake up as residents of 1432 Maple Street. Marcus rose before the sun, a habit formed over a lifetime of responsibility. There would be no leisurely coffee today, no grading papers at the kitchen table. Most of their belongings had already been packed into boxes and stacked in the living room, ready for the small move-in truck that would take them to the two-bedroom apartment Marcus had managed to secure across town. He dressed quietly, careful not to wake Emma or Liam. They deserved a few more minutes of peace before facing the day ahead. Marcus made his way to the kitchen, starting the coffee maker on autopilot. As the familiar aroma filled the room, he walked to the back door and looked out at the yard one last time. From this distance, there was nothing remarkable about it, just a modest patch of grass with an old oak tree and a swing set his children had outgrown years ago. But Marcus knew better. He knew every inch of this yard, from the flower beds Rebecca had planted to the corner where they'd buried the family's golden retriever when Liam was just 5. The coffee maker beeped, pulling Marcus from his reverie. He poured himself a cup and settled at the kitchen table, just as his old phone in the drawer began to vibrate again. He had missed the call last night, distracted by the family's somber dinner. Now curiosity overcame his melancholy. The number on the screen was vaguely familiar, though Marcus hadn't seen it in years. "Hello," he said tentatively. "Marcus Ellis?" The voice was professional, unfamiliar. "This is Gerald Washington, head of security at Central Metropolitan Bank. I apologize for calling so early, but this matter is rather urgent." Marcus's surprise was evident. "Central Metropolitan? I haven't had an account there since the takeover." "This isn't about an account, Mr. Ellis," Washington replied. "It's about your grandfather, Thomas Ellis. Are you aware that he worked in security here for over 30 years? "Of course," Marcus said, confused by the question. "And my father worked in maintenance until the merger. What's this about?" There was a pause on the line. "Something has been discovered during our renovation of the old vault section. Something that appears to directly involve your grandfather. I'm not at liberty to discuss details over the phone, but I'd very much like you to come down to the bank as soon as possible today." Marcus felt a flicker of something, not quite hope, but perhaps its distant cousin. "What does this have to do with my grandfather?" "I'm really not at liberty to say more over an unsecured line, Mr. Ellis, but I can tell you this is potentially significant for your family. How soon could you come in?" Marcus glanced at the kitchen clock. The moving truck was scheduled for 10 a.m. and Richard and Teresa would arrive with their attorney at 9 a.m. to oversee the final handover of the property. "Would 7:30 work? I have a prior commitment at 9. "Perfect. Ask for me at the main security desk. And Mr. Ellis, you might want to bring any documentation you have regarding your grandfather's employment at the bank." The line went dead before Marcus could ask any more questions. He set the phone down on the table and stared at it, uncertain what to make of the cryptic message. Emma appeared in the doorway, already dressed. Who was that calling so early? Marcus hesitated, then decided there was no point in false hope. Someone from Central Metropolitan Bank, about Grandpa Thomas. Emma raised an eyebrow. The bank? What would they want after all these years? I don't know, Marcus admitted. But I'm going to find out. They asked me to come in at 7:30, but Richard and Teresa will be here at 9 o'clock with the paperwork. Emma reminded him. I know, I should be back by then. Marcus rose from his chair. I need to find Grandpa's old bank papers. They should be in the box with the family documents. As Marcus headed toward the attic where they'd stored the family records, his mind raced with possibilities. What could the bank possibly have discovered after all these years? And why would they call him now of all days? It seemed too coincidental. Yet what connection could there possibly be between his grandfather's long-ago security job and their current eviction? In the attic, Marcus pulled down the heavy cardboard box labeled Family Documents and began sifting through decades of carefully preserved papers. Birth certificates, his parents' marriage license, the deed to the house, now painfully irrelevant, and finally, at the bottom, a manila envelope with his grandfather's name written in faded ink. Using the notebook as a guide, Marcus input the first sequence of numbers into the antique mechanical lock system. Nothing happened. He tried again, more carefully this time, still nothing. Maybe there's something we're missing, Washington suggested. Marcus studied the brass key again, noticing tiny numbers engraved along its shaft. Comparing them to his grandfather's notebook, he realized they were a date October 29, 1929, the day of the stock market crash that triggered the Great Depression. These aren't just access codes, Marcus said with sudden understanding. They're a sequence. The crash date is the starting point. He input a new combination, using the crash date as the first set of numbers, followed by the sequence from the index cards. The ancient mechanism clicked, and the heavy vault door began to swing open with surprising smoothness. Washington stepped back respectfully. This should be a private moment for you, Mr. Ellis. I'll wait here. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Inside the vault, Marcus found himself in a small, perfectly preserved room from another era. The walls were lined with safety deposit boxes of varying sizes, each bearing a number and a small brass plate. In the center stood a single table with an envelope bearing the Ellis family name. Marcus opened the envelope with care, finding another note and a small brass key. The final test is one of character. Box 1929 contains what you seek, but choose wisely what you take. Greed ruins what necessity preserves. Scanning the rows of boxes, Marcus quickly located 1929 larger than the others and positioned in the center of the far wall. The small brass key fit perfectly, and the box slid out with ease to reveal its contents. Marcus gasped. Inside lay stacks of gold certificates, bearer bonds, stock certificates for companies that had grown into industrial giants, and a collection of flawless diamonds and emeralds. At current values, the contents must be worth millions, perhaps hundreds of millions. But his grandfather's warning echoed in his mind. Choose wisely what you take. Greed ruins what necessity preserves. Was this another test? Was he supposed to take only what he needed? Marcus thought of his family's situation, the house they were about to lose, the children's education he struggled to fund, the medical bills still haunting them years after Rebecca's death. What did they truly need? After careful consideration, he selected a single stock certificate for a technology company worth enough to save their home and provide security for the children's education, perhaps $2 to $3 million at current market value. It would solve their immediate problems without dramatically changing their lives. He returned everything else to the box and closed it. As he turned to leave, He noticed a small button beneath the box labeled verification. Curiosity compelled him to press it. Immediately, a hidden panel in the wall slid open, revealing another safety deposit box with a note attached, for those who passed the test of temperance. This new box was unlocked, containing a deed and a letter in an unfamiliar handwriting. To the worthy successor of the Montgomery legacy, you have demonstrated wisdom by taking only what you need rather than all you could have. This is the true test of character I sought. The previous box contains wealth, yes, but this box contains legacy. Enclosed is the deed to Montgomery Estate and all associated holdings. I established this trust to find someone who values family and integrity above material wealth. The property includes the original Montgomery Mansion, 200 acres of prime land, and controlling interest in Montgomery Financial Holdings. Current value approximately $183 million. Having no heirs of my body, I seek heirs of my spirit. By your actions, you have proven worthy of this legacy. Harrison Montgomery, June 17, 1932. Marcus stood frozen, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he held in his hands. This wasn't just about saving his house, this was a complete transformation of his family's circumstances. Yet his grandfather had somehow known Marcus would need this exact intervention at this exact moment. Gathering the documents, Marcus returned to where Washington waited outside the vault. The security director smiled at Marcus's dazed expression. Judging by your face, you found something significant. My grandfather, Marcus began, struggling to articulate the enormity of the discovery. He was part of something much bigger than I ever imagined. Washington nodded. Thomas Ellis was highly respected here. Whatever he arranged, I'm not surprised it was extraordinary. He glanced at his watch. It's 8:30, Mr. Ellis. Didn't you mention a 9 o'clock appointment? Reality crashed back. Richard and Teresa would be arriving at the house in 30 minutes, expecting to take possession. I need to get home immediately, Marcus said urgently. I'll have these documents properly verified and registered while you're gone, Washington offered, gesturing to the papers Marcus clutched. By the time you return, everything will be officially in order. As Marcus drove home, his mind raced with implications. The stock certificate alone would save their house, allowing him to pay off Richard and maintain ownership. But the Montgomery legacy changed everything, not just financial security, but a complete reversal of fortune. How would he explain this to Emma and Liam? How would he face Richard and Teresa now? He pulled into his driveway at 8:55, relieved to see no sign yet of his cousins or the moving truck. Emma and Liam rushed onto the porch as he parked, their faces anxious. Dad, we were getting worried, Emma called. Richard just called. There. Running 10 minutes late. Marcus joined them on the porch, taking a deep breath. Something incredible has happened, he began, leading them inside to the kitchen table. He placed the stock certificate before them. This belongs to us now. It's worth enough to pay off Richard and keep the house. Liam stared in disbelief. Where did you get this? Is it real? It's real, Marcus assured him. It's part of a trust Grandpa Thomas established years ago. There's much more, but this is what matters right now. We don't have to leave. Emma's eyes filled with tears. So we can stay? Really stay? Marcus nodded, his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Yes, this house remains Ellis property. Before they could discuss further, the sound of tires on gravel announced Richard and Teresa's arrival. Marcus squared his shoulders. Let me handle this. Richard emerged from his luxury SUV, briefcase in hand, Teresa following with her designer purse and perpetual look of disdain. Marcus, Richard called with false joviality. Ready to complete our transaction? The movers should be here shortly. Marcus met them halfway down the walk, the stock certificate secure in a folder under his arm. There's been a change of plans, Richard. Richard's smile faltered. The paperwork is final, Marcus. Your sentimentality won't change the legal reality. I'm not talking about sentiment, Marcus replied evenly. I'm talking about this. He opened the folder, showing Richard the stock certificate. I'm exercising the buyback option in Clause 23 of the agreement. Richard's face flushed. That clause requires full market value plus 20% in cash today. You don't have that kind of money. Actually, I do, Marcus said calmly. This certificate is worth considerably more than what's required. I've already called my attorney. He's drawing up the paperwork now. The house stays with us. Teresa stepped forward, her voice sharp. Where did you suddenly get this kind of asset? This is highly suspicious. Family legacy, Marcus replied. Simply. Something you wouldn't understand, since you've been so focused on taking ours away. Richard's expression darkened as he examined the certificate more closely. This looks authentic, but I'll need my financial advisor to verify it before. You'll do that on your own time, Marcus interrupted. Today, you have two choices. Accept the buyback as stipulated in your own contract, or I contest the entire inheritance claim on grounds my attorney is quite confident will succeed. The mention of potential legal challenges shifted something in Richard's calculation. He prided himself on clean, efficient business deals. Prolonged legal battles weren't his style. The buyback clause was merely a formality, Richard muttered. We never expected you to actually have the funds. Clearly, Marcus agreed. Which makes me wonder why you included it at all. Teresa tugged at Richard's sleeve. We should consult with the attorney before proceeding. Richard nodded stiffly. We'll review the situation and be in touch, Marcus. Don't think this changes everything. There are still legal considerations. Of course, Marcus replied. My attorney will contact yours this afternoon. As Richard and Teresa retreated to their vehicle, Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The immediate crisis was averted. The house was saved. But the full implications of the Montgomery legacy remained to be explored. Back inside, Emma and Liam waited with barely contained excitement. What happened? Liam demanded. Are they gone for good? They're gone, Marcus confirmed. And yes, I think it's for good. Richard won't want to fight this once he understands what he's up against. So what happens now? Emma asked. What was that about much more at the bank? Marcus sat down, gathering his thoughts. How could he explain the extraordinary discovery in terms his children would understand? Your great-grandfather was part of something remarkable, he began. Something that connects us to one of the city's founding families in ways I'm still trying to comprehend. He described the hidden vault, the test of character, and finally, the Montgomery legacy that awaited them. As he spoke, he watched their expressions shift from disbelief to wonder. So we're rich now? Liam asked tentatively. It's more complicated than that, Marcus replied. We've been entrusted with a legacy that comes with responsibility. The Montgomery fortune wasn't just about money, it was about stewardship and community. If we accept it, we accept those responsibilities too. Emma, always the practical one, frowned thoughtfully. But why didn't Grandpa Thomas just tell you about this? Why all this secrecy and tests? I think he wanted to be sure we'd use it wisely, Marcus said. The note mentioned the test was about taking only what we needed, not everything we could grab. Maybe he wanted to ensure the legacy would go to someone who understood its true value. Which isn't just the money, Emma concluded, understanding dawning in her eyes. Exactly, Marcus agreed. Money changes people, often not for the better. By hiding this until we faced losing everything, he made sure we'd appreciate what truly matters first. The kitchen fell silent as they contemplated this new reality. The house they'd fought so hard to keep now seemed just a small part of a much larger inheritance, not just of wealth, but of values and responsibility. So what do we do now? Liam finally asked. Marcus smiled, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. First, we call the movers and tell them their services won't be needed. Then we go back to the bank to complete the necessary paperwork. And after that, he looked around at the modest kitchen that had been the heart of their home through so many challenges. After that, we honor your great-grandfather's legacy by living up to the trust he placed in us. As he spoke these words, Marcus felt a profound sense of connection to his grandfather, not just through blood, but through the values Thomas had silently passed down, waiting for the moment when they would be most needed. The timing seemed almost miraculous, as if Thomas had somehow known exactly when his family would face their greatest challenge. The old grandfather clock in the corner chimed 9 times, marking not the end they had feared, but the beginning of something entirely unexpected. The Ellis family would stay in their home, but nothing would ever be quite the same again. 3 days after their remarkable discovery at Central Metropolitan Bank, Marcus Ellis stood in the grand foyer of Montgomery Mansion, surrounded by marble columns and gilded fixtures that seemed to belong to another era entirely. His children walked beside him, their footsteps echoing on the polished floor as Gerald Washington led them on a tour of what was now, incredibly, their property. The estate has been maintained by the Montgomery Trust for nearly a century, Washington explained, gesturing toward the sweeping staircase. Harrison Montgomery established an endowment specifically for preservation, with instructions that everything be kept ready for the rightful heir when they were identified. Emma ran her hand along an ornately carved banister. "It's like a museum," she whispered. "Not a museum," Washington corrected with a smile. "A home your home, if you choose to make it so. Though I understand if you'd prefer to remain in your current residence, given its sentimental value." Marcus nodded, still overwhelmed by the scale of their inheritance. The past 72 hours had been a whirlwind of legal meetings, document signings, and revelations about the Montgomery legacy. Richard and Teresa had retreated quickly once their attorneys confirmed the legitimacy of Marcus's claim, accepting the buyback payment with tight-lipped resentment. The main house has 12 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a library containing first editions dating back to the 1800s, and a ballroom that hasn't hosted an event since 1959. Washington continued, leading them through a corridor lined with portraits of stern-faced men in Victorian attire. "And you're saying all of this belongs to us now?" Liam asked, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "Just because Grandpa Thomas left a box in a vault?" "Not quite," Washington replied. "Your great-grandfather was selected as the guardian of the Montgomery legacy because he demonstrated the qualities Harrison Montgomery valued: integrity, loyalty, and community responsibility. The final test which your father passed confirmed those same qualities persist in your family. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." They entered the library, a 2-story room with walls of leather-bound books and a massive oak desk positioned before floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the estate's meticulously maintained gardens. On the desk lay several leather portfolios bearing the Montgomery crest. "These contain the full accounting of Montgomery Financial Holdings," Washington explained. "The company has been managed by a board of trustees following Montgomery's directives, focused primarily on community investment and sustainable growth rather than maximum profit. As controlling shareholder, you now have authority to continue or adjust that approach." Marcus opened one portfolio to find detailed reports on investments in everything from historic preservation projects to educational foundations. "This is extraordinary," he murmured. "Montgomery wasn't just wealthy, he was visionary." "Indeed," Washington agreed. During the Depression, when many of his peers were jumping from windows after losing everything, Montgomery was secretly preserving assets and establishing frameworks for community recovery. He believed wealth carried obligation, a philosophy your grandfather Thomas apparently shared. As they continued exploring the mansion, Marcus found himself drawn to the quote, portrait gallery. Among the imposing figures of the Montgomery lineage hung a smaller, more modest painting, a man in a security uniform standing beside a vault door. The nameplate read simply, "Thomas Ellis, Guardian." "When was this painted?" Marcus asked, stunned to see his grandfather immortalized among banking aristocracy. 1985, shortly before his retirement, Washington replied. The board commissioned it in recognition of his service, though I doubt many understood its true significance. Marcus studied his grandfather's face, the same steady gaze he remembered from childhood, revealing nothing of the extraordinary secret he had carried. What must it have been like, working as a security guard while knowing you were the designated heir to one of the city's greatest fortunes? The discipline required to maintain that secret, to wait for the right moment, was almost unfathomable. "Dad?" Emma's voice broke through his reflection. "What are we going to do with all this?" It was the question that had been circling in Marcus's mind since the vault discovery. What would responsible stewardship of the Montgomery legacy look like? How could they honor both Thomas Ellis's trust and Harrison Montgomery's vision? "I'm not entirely sure yet," Marcus admitted. "But I know we need to understand it fully before making any decisions." Washington checked his watch. "The board of Montgomery Financial has been notified of the succession. They've requested a meeting at your earliest convenience, though there's no rush. The company has operated successfully under trustee management for decades." As they completed their tour in the mansion's solarium, Washington handed Marcus a final envelope. One last item, Harrison Montgomery's personal journal. The instructions indicate it should be read by the heir alone before any major decisions are made. Later that evening, back in their modest home on Maple Street, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, the same table where they had faced eviction just days earlier, and carefully opened Montgomery's journal. Emma and Liam had gone to bed, exhausted by the day's revelations and the emotional whiplash of moving from imminent homelessness to extraordinary wealth in less than a week. The journal's leather binding cracked slightly as Marcus opened it, revealing pages of meticulous handwriting dating back to 1929. He began reading, immediately captivated by Montgomery's account of the stock market crash and its aftermath. October 30, 1929. The panic is complete. Men who considered themselves untouchable yesterday are ruined today. I thank Providence for my caution these past years. While others leveraged their assets to participate in market speculation, I quietly converted significant holdings to gold and secured hard assets. The bank will weather this storm, though I fear for the broader consequences to our community. As Marcus read deeper into the journal, a picture emerged of a man far ahead of his time, someone who viewed wealth as a tool for community betterment rather than personal aggrandizement. Montgomery had used the chaos of the Depression to quietly acquire properties being sold in desperation, not to profit from others' misfortune, but to preserve them for future community benefit. May 1730. Purchased the Wilson Textile Factory today at fraction of its worth. The workers fear closure, but I have assured them operations will continue. Profits may be minimal during this period, but maintaining employment for 300 families outweighs immediate financial return. When stability returns, the community will be stronger for having maintained its productive capacity. We learn, Marcus said simply. We take time to understand what we've inherited, not just the assets, but the responsibility. Montgomery believed wealth should serve community, not just the individual. I think that's a principle worth honoring. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. So we're staying here, but we're also, what? Becoming philanthropists? Liam's tone was skeptical. In a way, Marcus acknowledged. But more importantly, we're going to be deliberate about this. No sudden lifestyle changes, no rash decisions. We'll establish college funds for both of you, pay off our remaining debts, and make some modest improvements to the house. Beyond that, we'll take time to learn about Montgomery Financial and how it operates before making any major changes. Emma studied her father's face. You're worried about what this money might do to us, aren't you? Marcus smiled at his perceptive daughter. Your great-grandfather was trusted with this legacy because he understood something important: character matters more than wealth. I don't want us to lose sight of who we are just because our circumstances have changed. But some changes would be nice, Liam argued. Mom's medical bills wiped out your savings. You've been working 2 jobs since she died. Maybe it's okay to make things easier. You're right, Marcus agreed. There's a balance to find. Which is why I've made a decision about my first official act as head of Montgomery Financial. He slid a folder across the table containing a proposal he'd drafted the night before. Emma opened it, reading aloud. The Rebecca Ellis Memorial Scholarship Fund for Medical Research. Mom's name, she said softly, looking up with glistening eyes. Marcus nodded. A foundation dedicated to research in early detection of heart conditions like the one that took your mother. Montgomery believed in using wealth to address community needs. I can't think of a better way to honor both his philosophy and your mother's memory. Liam, usually so guarded with his emotions, wiped quickly at his eyes. She would have liked that. There's more, Marcus continued. I'm establishing education funds for both of you, but also creating a broader scholarship program for students. At my school, kids with potential who face financial barriers to college. Emma leaned back, considering this approach. So we use the money to help others, not just ourselves. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. We've been given an extraordinary opportunity. I think the right response is gratitude expressed through generosity. The discussion continued through breakfast, with Emma and Liam offering their own ideas for responsible use of their newfound resources. Emma suggested renovating the mansion to serve partially as a community arts center, while Liam, surprising his family, proposed establishing a technology program for underprivileged middle school students. Maybe we could use part of the Montgomery estate for summer coding camps, he suggested with uncharacteristic enthusiasm. Kids who can't afford expensive tech programs could come learn for free. Marcus felt a surge of pride listening to his children. Perhaps Thomas Ellis had recognized something in the family character that would survive across generations, a sense of responsibility that wealth might enhance rather than corrupt. Later that day, Marcus returned to Central Metropolitan Bank for his first official meeting with the Montgomery Financial Board of Directors. He felt strangely calm as he entered the imposing boardroom where 8 serious-faced executives awaited him. Some regarded him with obvious skepticism, a high school history teacher suddenly in control of a $183 million legacy. Mr. Ellis, began Eleanor Winters, the board chairwoman, and Marcus had learned, the granddaughter of Arthur Winters Montgomery's original guardian. We've prepared a comprehensive overview of the company's current holdings and operations for your review. Thank you, Marcus replied, taking his seat at the head of the table. But before we begin, I'd like to share my intentions regarding the Montgomery legacy. For the next 30 minutes, Marcus outlined his vision maintaining the company's community-focused investment approach while expanding its educational and medical research initiatives. He presented his scholarship proposals and his plan to develop part of the Montgomery estate as a community resource. In essence, he concluded, I don't intend to disrupt what's working well. Harrison Montgomery established principles that have proven sound for nearly a century. My role is to build upon that foundation, not replace it. The tension in the room visibly eased. Several board members exchanged approving glances. Eleanor Winters smiled for the first time. Your great-grandfather would be pleased, she said. There were concerns you might take a more conventional approach to wealth management. Marcus understood the unspoken concern that he might dismantle Montgomery's careful community-oriented strategy in favor of maximizing personal gain. I passed the test in the vault for a reason, he said simply. The legacy isn't just about the money. As the meeting progressed into technical discussions of investment portfolios and corporate governance, Marcus found himself thinking about the remarkable chain of events that had brought him here. From the brink of losing his family home to sitting at the head of a boardroom, entrusted with resources that could impact thousands of lives, all because his grandfather had recognized in him something worth preserving. 2 weeks later, Richard and Teresa requested a meeting. Marcus agreed, inviting them to the modest home on Maple Street rather than the Montgomery mansion. When they arrived, their demeanor was noticeably subdued compared to their previous visit. "We've heard things," Richard began awkwardly after declining coffee, "about your inheritance." "About Montgomery Financial," Marcus nodded. "News travels fast in financial circles. Why didn't you tell us?" Teresa asked, her customary condescension replaced with something approaching humility. "When we were trying to take your house, why keep quiet about such resources?" "I didn't know," Marcus answered truthfully. "The discovery happened the morning you were scheduled to take possession. Before that, I was exactly what I appeared to be, a teacher struggling to keep his family home." Richard shifted uncomfortably. "Well, we wanted to, that is, we're interested in discussing potential collaboration. With your new position, there could be synergies between Montgomery Financial and our development projects." Marcus studied his cousin's face, recognizing the calculation behind the sudden interest and family connection. "I appreciate your reaching out," he said carefully. "But any business relationship would need to align with Montgomery's established principles of community benefit and sustainable development." Of course, Richard agreed quickly. "We're very community-minded, always have been." Teresa nodded enthusiastically. "Family is important to us, Marcus. We've always felt that way." The conversation continued with Richard and Teresa attempting to establish a warmth that had never previously existed between them. Marcus listened politely, neither encouraging nor dismissing their overtures. When they finally departed with promises to stay in closer touch, Emma emerged from the kitchen where she'd been deliberately giving them privacy. "That was uncomfortable to overhear," she commented, sitting beside her father on the couch. "They really switched gears fast," Marcus nodded. "Money changes how people see you. It's one of the challenges we'll face." "Are you going to work with them?" she asked. "Not unless they demonstrate genuine change," Marcus replied. Montgomery believed character matters more than connections. "I think that's a good principle for deciding who we partner with." Over the following months, the Ellis family settled into a new normal that balanced their extraordinary circumstances with intentional ordinariness. They remained in the house on Maple Street, making modest improvements rather than embracing luxury. Marcus continued teaching, establishing a foundation that allowed him to supplement teacher salaries throughout the district without drawing attention to his personal wealth. The Montgomery mansion was renovated to house both the families. Private living quarters and public spaces for community arts programs and educational initiatives. The Rebecca Ellis Memorial Scholarship Fund awarded its first research grants to promising cardiologists studying early detection methods for heart conditions. Liam's summer coding camp welcomed its inaugural class of middle school students, with the teenager himself serving as a teaching assistant. 1 year after the vault discovery, Marcus stood in the Montgomery family cemetery, where Harrison Montgomery had been laid to rest in 1932. Beside him stood Gerald Washington, who had become both financial advisor and friend during the transition. "Harrison would be pleased," Washington remarked, gesturing toward the maintenance work being done on the long-neglected cemetery. "The legacy is in good hands." Marcus nodded, placing a small stone on Montgomery's grave marker, a gesture of respect his grandfather, Thomas, had apparently performed annually during his time as guardian. "I still wonder how my grandfather knew. How he recognized that our Family would face this specific challenge at this specific time. Washington smiled. Thomas Ellis was an exceptional judge of character. Perhaps he saw in Richard the potential for exactly what happened. Or perhaps he simply trusted that when genuine need arose, the legacy would serve its purpose. As they walked back toward the main house, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary chain of guardianship that had preserved the Montgomery fortune for nearly a century, passing it not through bloodlines, but through recognized character. From Harrison Montgomery to Arthur Winters, from Winters to his successors, and finally to Thomas Ellis, who had designated Marcus as the ultimate recipient, a chain of trust spanning generations. Emma met them on the mansion's terrace, college. Acceptance letters in hand. Stanford and Columbia both said yes, she announced. Full academic scholarships to both, so the education fund can go to someone else who needs it more. Marcus embraced his daughter, proud beyond words of her decision to decline financial advantage she didn't require. Your great-grandfather would approve, he said softly. Using privilege to create opportunity for others is exactly what the Montgomery legacy stands for. As evening settled over the estate, Marcus found himself in the library. Adding his own entry to the journal Harrison Montgomery had begun nearly a century earlier. The true wealth of the Montgomery legacy isn't measured in dollars, but in impact. When faced with losing everything, our family discovered something far more valuable than material security. We found purpose. The test in the vault wasn't just about taking only what we needed. It was about recognizing that having more than we need creates responsibility toward others. In preserving this legacy, we don't merely maintain assets. We continue a vision where prosperity serves community, where privilege creates opportunity, and where what we have matters less than what we do with it. Marcus closed the journal, knowing that someday, perhaps decades in the future, another guardian would need to be identified, another worthy successor found. The chain of responsibility would continue, and with it, the extraordinary legacy that had saved his family when they needed it most. The greatest inheritance he had come to understand wasn't the money or the property or even the company. It was the wisdom to use abundance well, a lesson his grandfather Thomas had taught through example long before Marcus understood the full extent of his heritage. In the end, that was the true wealth of the Ellis family, not what they possessed, but who they chose to be. 5 years after the discovery of the Montgomery legacy, Marcus Ellis stood in the gymnasium of Franklin High School, watching his students present their community impact projects to a panel of judges. As a history teacher, he had always encouraged civic engagement, but the History and Action program he'd established had transformed theoretical learning into practical community involvement. Our project focused on restoring the Veterans Memorial Park, explained Jasmine Chen, a senior whose confidence had blossomed throughout the year. We researched the original 1945 design, interviewed elderly veterans about their memories of the space, and partnered with local landscapers to implement historically accurate renovations while improving accessibility. Marcus nodded encouragingly. As Jasmine clicked through slides showing the remarkable transformation, from neglected public space to vibrant community gathering place. What the students didn't know was that Montgomery Financial had quietly matched every dollar they'd raised, allowing their modest project to achieve remarkable scope. Marcus had been careful to keep his financial contributions anonymous, maintaining the focus on the students' efforts rather than his resources. Principal Rodriguez joined him as the presentations continued. "You've changed this school, Marcus," she said quietly. 5 years ago, we were struggling to keep basic programs funded. Now we're a model for community-engaged education. Marcus smiled, acknowledging her words while deflecting personal credit. The students did the work. I just created the opportunity. Rodriguez gave him a knowing look. They both understood that his just creating opportunity had involved establishing an educational foundation that supported not only Franklin High but schools throughout the district, all structured to appear as competitive grants rather than personal philanthropy. Marcus had been adamant about maintaining his identity as a teacher rather than becoming known as a wealthy benefactor. "Dad," Liam's voice called from the gymnasium entrance. Now 19 and home from his sophomore year. At MIT, Liam had grown into a thoughtful young man who balanced his technology interests with genuine social awareness. "Sorry I'm late. The coding camp planning meeting ran long." Marcus embraced his son, still marveling at how much he resembled Rebecca around the eyes. "You're just in time for the environmental projects. How's the summer program shaping up?" "Incredible," Liam replied enthusiastically. "We've got twice as many applicants as last year, and 3 of our original students are returning as junior instructors. The tech industry partnerships are solid. Google and Microsoft are both sending engineers as guest lecturers." What had begun as Liam's modest proposal for a summer coding camp had evolved into the Montgomery Technology Access Program, providing comprehensive technology education to hundreds of underprivileged students annually. The program had already produced measurable outcomes: college acceptances, scholarship offers, and even job placements for participants. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. As they watched the presentations together, Marcus reflected on the remarkable journey their family had experienced. The modest house on Maple Street remained their primary residence, though they now split time between there and a private wing of the Montgomery mansion. Emma was completing her medical degree at Stanford, focusing on preventative cardiology in honor of her mother. The Rebecca Ellis Memorial Research Foundation had already funded breakthroughs in early detection technology for heart conditions. Most significantly, the Ellis family had maintained their core values despite their extraordinary circumstances. They lived comfortably but not extravagantly, focusing their resources on expanding opportunity for others rather than accumulating status symbols for themselves. The true impact of the Montgomery legacy was measured not in what they possessed, but in what they enabled others to achieve. Later that evening, Marcus hosted a small gathering at the Montgomery estate, not in the formal dining room with its crystal chandeliers and priceless artwork, but in the renovated carriage house that now served as a community meeting space. Around the table sat an unlikely assembly: Eleanor Winters from the Montgomery Financial Board, Gerald Washington, now retired from the bank but still a trusted advisor, Principal Rodriguez, and 3 recent graduates of the Montgomery Scholarship Program, now embarking on careers in education, medicine, and environmental science. 5 years ago today, Marcus began, raising his glass, our family's circumstances changed dramatically. This anniversary dinner has become our tradition for reflecting on what we've learned and planning for the future. Eleanor Winters, now in her 70s but sharp as ever, smiled. Harrison Montgomery would be proud of what you've accomplished, Marcus. The legacy is not just preserved but enhanced. The legacy isn't mine, Marcus replied. It belongs to everyone who benefits from it and everyone who contributes to its purpose. Which is why I've asked you all here tonight. He distributed folders containing his proposal for the next phase of the Montgomery Ellis initiatives, an integrated approach to community development that would coordinate educational, healthcare, and economic opportunities in the city's most underserved neighborhoods. This is ambitious, Washington commented, reviewing the materials. A comprehensive strategy rather than separate programs. Because separate programs address symptoms, not causes, Marcus explained. A child can't focus on coding camp if they're worried about healthcare or housing security. A scholarship means little if the recipient's family is struggling with basic needs. Principal Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. Systems thinking applied to community development. This could be transformative if implemented properly. That's where all of you come in, Marcus continued. Each of you represents a different perspective and area of expertise. I'm asking you to form the core advisory committee for this initiative to help design implementation that respects community autonomy while providing meaningful support. The conversation flowed late into the evening with the scholarship, graduates offering particularly valuable insights from their lived experiences. As the meeting concluded, Marcus felt a profound sense of alignment with Harrison Montgomery's original vision: wealth as a tool for community betterment rather than personal status. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Walking Washington to his car afterward, Marcus paused beneath the oak trees that lined the estate's driveway. There's something I've been meaning to ask you, Gerald. Something that's puzzled me since the beginning. What's that? The older man inquired. The timing, Marcus said. The vault discovery happened literally hours before we would have lost our home. After nearly a century of waiting, the Montgomery legacy emerged at precisely the moment we needed. That can't be coincidence. Washington's expression became thoughtful. I've wondered about that myself. The official explanation is that your cousin's property search triggered the automated alert system. But between us, he glanced around as if checking for listeners. I reviewed the bank's security logs afterward. Someone accessed the system manually 2 days before the alert supposedly triggered automatically. Someone inside the bank. Knew? Marcus asked, surprised. Not just someone, Washington replied. The access code used belonged to Thomas Ellis, your grandfather. A code that should have been deactivated decades ago when he retired. Marcus stared at him. That's impossible. My grandfather passed away 5 years before the discovery. Washington nodded. I know. That's what makes it so remarkable. Either someone used his credentials posthumously, or what? Or your grandfather arranged a timing mechanism years in advance, something programmed to activate precisely when needed. Washington shrugged. Either way, the timing wasn't random. Someone or something intervened deliberately. This revelation stayed with Marcus as he returned to the house on Maple Street later that night. After checking that Liam was settled in his old bedroom, Marcus went to his study, formerly the dining room, now converted to accommodate his work for both the school and Montgomery Financial. On the wall hung a portrait of his grandfather Thomas, not the formal painting from the bank, but a simple family photograph taken at Marcus's college graduation. Thomas stood straight-backed and proud in a suit he rarely wore, his expression revealing nothing of the extraordinary secret he carried. How did you know, Grandpa? Marcus whispered to the photograph. How did you arrange everything so perfectly? His contemplation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Come in, he called, expecting Liam with a late-night snack request as he often made when home from college. Instead, Emma entered, surprising him completely. Surprise, she said, dropping her travel bag and embracing him warmly. I got an earlier flight. Emma, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow. Marcus held his daughter tight, savoring the unexpected moment. At 21, Emma had blossomed into a poised young woman whose compassionate intelligence reminded him painfully of Rebecca. I wanted to be here for the whole anniversary, she explained, settling into the chair across from his desk. 5 years is significant. Besides, I have news I wanted to share in person. Good news, I hope. Emma nodded, her expression both excited and serious. Remember Dr. Patel, the lead researcher on the cardiac imaging project, the Foundation, funded last year? She's invited me to join her team for my residency. The early detection protocol they're developing could save thousands of lives. That's wonderful, Marcus said, genuinely proud. Your mother would be so proud of you, Emma. There's more, she continued. The protocol is being named after Mom, the Rebecca Ellis Early Intervention System. Dr. Patel said the Foundation's funding was the catalyst that made everything possible. Marcus felt a wave of emotion. The Foundation had been his first act as custodian of the Montgomery legacy, A way of honoring Rebecca while addressing the very medical challenge that had taken her from them. Now it had come full circle, with Emma directly involved in work that might prevent other families from experiencing similar loss. "That's the best news I could imagine," he said softly. "It gives meaning to everything we've been through." Emma studied her father's face. "You've been thinking about Grandpa Thomas again, haven't you? I can always tell." Marcus gestured to the files on his desk. "Washington shared something interesting tonight. There's evidence Grandpa might have programmed the vault discovery timing specifically to coincide with our eviction crisis." "That doesn't surprise me," Emma replied. "Grandpa was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Remember how he used to set up elaborate treasure hunts for us as kids. The clues would seem random until suddenly they all connected perfectly at the end. But this would have required him to anticipate events years after his death," Marcus pointed out. "To somehow know Richard would discover the property loophole, that we'd be facing eviction on that specific date." Emma considered this. "Or maybe he created a system with multiple triggers, designed to activate whenever the family faced genuine crisis, whatever form it took. The timing seemed miraculous to us because we only saw our specific situation. But perhaps Grandpa created a safety net designed to deploy under various threat scenarios." The insight struck Marcus as profoundly plausible. Thomas Ellis had been both pragmatic and deeply strategic, the kind of man who would plan for multiple contingencies rather than a single predicted outcome. "That actually makes sense," Marcus acknowledged. "A flexible system rather than a fixed prediction." "Exactly," Emma nodded. "And it aligns perfectly with what we've learned about Harrison Montgomery's original vision, a legacy designed to emerge when truly needed, not when simply wanted." The conversation shifted to family matters, Liam's studies, Emma's research. Plans for the summer, but Marcus found himself returning to the elegant logic of Emma's explanation. Thomas Ellis hadn't needed supernatural foresight. He had simply created a sophisticated safety net, calibrated to recognize genuine need and distinguish it from mere desire. The next morning, the Ellis family gathered in the kitchen of their Maple Street home for breakfast, just as they had done throughout the children's upbringing. The modesty of the setting contrasted sharply with their financial reality, but it remained the heart of their family identity, the place where they had struggled together after Rebecca's death, where they had faced eviction, and where they had first grappled with the implications of their unexpected inheritance. "I've been thinking," Marcus said as they finished their meal, "about what success really means for the Montgomery Ellis legacy." "Financial growth?" Liam suggested. "The investment portfolio has outperformed market averages every year." "Community impact?" Emma offered. "The educational initiatives, medical research, neighborhood development, the ripple effects are measurable and growing," Marcus nodded. Acknowledging both perspectives, "Those matter certainly. But I'm thinking about something more fundamental. Harrison Montgomery established his legacy during the Depression because he recognized that wealth concentrated without purpose ultimately serves no one, not even its possessor. The whole character matters more than cash philosophy," Liam summarized. "Exactly," Marcus agreed. "And Thomas Ellis preserved that legacy because he understood something similar, that resources have meaning only through their application to genuine need. So maybe success isn't measured by growth or even impact, but by integrity to purpose." Emma leaned forward, intrigued. "What does that look like in practice?" "It means we continue making deliberate choices," Marcus explained. "Living comfortably, but not extravagantly. Using our position to create opportunity rather than accumulate influence. Measuring our actions not by what they provide for us, but by what they enable for others. Basically, don't become Richard and Teresa," Liam quipped, referring to their cousins who, despite a partnership opportunity with Montgomery Financial, had ultimately proven unwilling to embrace its community-focused approach. "More than that," Marcus corrected gently. It means recognizing that we're not owners of the Montgomery legacy but stewards of it. Our responsibility is to preserve not just its financial value, but its moral purpose. As they cleared the breakfast dishes together, a family ritual maintained. Despite their ability to employ staff, Marcus shared his conversation with Washington about the mysterious timing of the vault discovery. Emma explained her theory about a flexible security system designed to activate under various threat scenarios. So Grandpa created a safety net, not a prediction, Liam mused. That's actually brilliant engineering. A responsive system rather than a static one. And perfectly aligned with Montgomery's original vision, Emma added. Resources preserved until genuinely needed, then deployed with purpose. Later that day, Marcus visited the Central Metropolitan Bank for the anniversary ceremony commemorating the Montgomery legacy. The bank's historic section had been renovated as a museum highlighting its role during the Depression and the vision of its founder. A special exhibit honored the guardians of the legacy, from Arthur Winters through Thomas Ellis. As Marcus examined the exhibit, he noticed a detail he'd overlooked in previous visits, a quote from Harrison Montgomery's journal displayed beneath his portrait. True wealth is measured not by what one accumulates, but by what one makes possible for others. The simplicity and clarity of the statement crystallized everything Marcus had come to understand about his responsibility. The Montgomery Ellis legacy wasn't ultimately about money at all, it was about possibility. The possibility of education for those otherwise denied it. The possibility of medical care for the vulnerable. The possibility of community renewal where others saw only decline. Standing before his grandfather's portrait in the Guardians section, Marcus felt a deep sense of connection across generations from Montgomery to Winters to Thomas Ellis. To himself, and eventually to Emma and Liam. Each guardian had preserved not just assets but purpose, ensuring that wealth served as a tool for community betterment rather than personal aggrandizement. "Penny for your thoughts," said a voice. Beside him, Marcus turned to find Eleanor Winters, elegant as always in her role as board chairwoman. "Just reflecting on responsibility," Marcus replied. "And possibility," Winters smiled. "Harrison Montgomery would be pleased with what you've accomplished these past 5 years. Not just the financial stewardship, though that's been exemplary, but the moral stewardship." "I had excellent examples," Marcus acknowledged. "My grandfather, your grandfather. Montgomery himself." "Yes, but you've added something important," Winters observed. "You've demonstrated how to live with wealth without being defined by it. That's remarkably rare, especially in someone who didn't grow up with privilege." The observation struck Marcus as profound. He had indeed focused on maintaining his identity as teacher, father, and community member first, with financial steward as an important but secondary role. Unlike Richard and Teresa, who defined themselves by what they possessed, Marcus had deliberately shaped his relationship with wealth to serve his values rather than determine them. That evening, as the family gathered at the Montgomery mansion for the formal anniversary celebration with board members, scholarship recipients, and community partners, Marcus found a moment of quiet reflection on the estate's terrace overlooking the city lights. The contrast was striking, from nearly losing their modest home to standing on the terrace of a mansion that was partially theirs, surrounded by people whose lives had been impacted by the Montgomery Ellis initiatives. Emma joined him, looking elegant in a simple dress that managed to be both appropriate for the occasion and reflective of her practical sensibility. "Quite a journey these past 5 years," she commented, following his gaze toward the city skyline. "Sometimes I still can't believe it," Marcus admitted. "From eviction notice to all this in the span of a day. It seemed like a miracle at the time." "Not a miracle," Emma corrected gently. "A legacy. A carefully preserved possibility that activated precisely when needed." Marcus nodded, recognizing the wisdom in her perspective. "The real test wasn't finding the legacy," he said thoughtfully. "It was what we chose to do with it afterward. and what we continue to choose every day, Emma added. Grandpa Thomas trusted you with this responsibility because he knew you'd make choices based on purpose, not just profit. As they rejoined the gathering, Marcus found himself moving through conversations with scholarship recipients, community partners, and board members with a renewed sense of clarity. Each interaction represented not an obligation of wealth, but an opportunity for impact chances to create possibility where it had previously been limited. Liam approached with Dr. Abernathy, the elderly former bank president who had first introduced Marcus's grandfather to the vault security protocols decades earlier. Dr. Abernathy was just sharing some stories about Grandpa Thomas, Liam explained. Your grandfather had an extraordinary sense of timing, the elderly man recalled. He seemed to anticipate needs before they arose. During the banking crisis of the 1980s, he implemented security protocols that proved crucial when no one else saw the necessity. It was as if he could see around corners. He created systems that would respond when needed, Marcus observed, thinking of Emma's insight. Rather than trying to predict exact circumstances. Precisely, Dr. Abernathy agreed. Thomas understood that flexibility was more valuable than fixed plans. It's a principle that served the bank well and evidently served your family too. As the evening concluded, Marcus gathered the family for a private moment in Harrison Montgomery's study, a room preserved much as it had been in 1932, with the original desk where Montgomery had written his journal entries about legacy and responsibility. 5 years ago, we faced losing everything, Marcus began, looking at his children with profound gratitude. Today, we have the privilege of creating possibility for others. The true miracle isn't what we received, but what we've been able to give because of it. To the Montgomery Ellis legacy, Emma proposed, raising her glass. And to Grandpa Thomas, Liam added, the guardian who saw around corners. Marcus smiled, adding his own toast, to possibility preserved, protected, and passed forward. As they stood together in the historic study, Marcus recognized that they had indeed honored both Harrison Montgomery's vision and Thomas Ellis's trust. The legacy had not merely survived but evolved, its purpose maintained while its impact expanded. Most importantly, they had navigated the challenge of sudden wealth without losing their essential character, remaining the same family that had faced eviction together, just with greater capacity to create change beyond themselves. The journey from that desperate morning clutching an eviction notice to this moment of purposeful prosperity had taught Marcus the most valuable lesson of all. True wealth lay not in what they had gained, but in what they had been able to give. Not in what had been preserved for them, but in what they could make possible for others. Whatever comes next, Marcus said to his children, remember that we're not defined by what we have, but by what we do with it. That's the real Montgomery Ellis legacy, and it's what will outlast any fortune. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.